Imagine this. The night is cold. The air feels heavier than usual, and you find yourself standing in front of an abandoned hospital. Its windows are shattered, its walls cracked and fading with time. The silence is almost unbearable until you hear it. A faint echo of footsteps, but you know you're the only one there. Hospitals have always had a strange effect on us. Even when they're full of life, bustling with doctors and nurses, there's an uneasy energy in the air. And once they're abandoned, they become something else entirely. Places where shadows seem to move on their own, and where whispers linger long after the last patient has gone. Let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered why hospitals, more than almost any other building, are said to be haunted? Is it because of the countless lives that ended within their walls? Or is it because our minds can separate the memories of sickness and pain from the place itself? And since you're already here with the Vanguard Vault family members on this journey, let's make this personal. Tell me in the comments right now, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? I love seeing the answers. Some of you are brave enough to watch these stories late at night, while others stick to daylight. Which one are you? Drop it below. I'll be reading the comments, and I'll even pin some of the most interesting ones. So don't be shy. Share your location, share the time. Let's see how far this haunted community reaches across the globe. And one more question before we dive in. Would you walk alone through a hospital basement at night if you had the chance? Yes or no? Be honest. I'm curious to see how many of you are thrill seekers, and how many of you wouldn't dare. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is where haunted history lives. If you love stories of abandoned hospitals, paranormal encounters, and chilling tales from the past, make sure to hit subscribe and join our growing community. Now, let's step inside together. Because tonight, we're uncovering the 15 most haunted hospitals in Michigan. And trust me, you should never visit these wards alone. When you think about hospitals today, you probably imagine clean white walls, modern machines beeping, and doctors rushing between rooms. But if we travel back just a century or two, hospitals were very different. Darker, colder, and in many cases far more dangerous than the diseases people came in with. Hospitals have always carried a strange duality. They are places of healing, but also of suffering. For every life saved, there are countless others that ended on the very same grounds. And it's this balance, this overlap of hope and despair, that many believe leaves behind something that never quite disappears. The mortality of old hospitals. Before modern medicine, entering a hospital was often like signing a silent contract with death. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, mortality rates in hospitals were shockingly high. Simple infections could spread uncontrollably. Patients who came in with minor injuries often left in coffins because of unsanitary conditions. Imagine lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by dozens of others in the same ward, with no privacy, no antibiotics, and doctors who didn't even wear gloves. Every cough, every moan, every scream of pain echoed across the room. Death wasn't a rare event. It was expected. Now think about the energy those walls must have absorbed. Decades of pain, suffering, last breaths, and unspoken goodbyes. Do you think that kind of energy ever really leaves a place? Or does it seep into the bricks, the floors, the air itself? Pause for a moment and tell me in the comments. If you had to walk through a hospital basement alone, would you do it? Yes or no? I want to see how many of you would actually take that risk. Abandoned wards and tragic memories. Fast forward to today. Many of those old hospitals no longer operate. Some were shut down because they couldn't keep up with modern medicine. Others closed because their reputations became too terrifying. Locals whispering about screams in the night or apparitions roaming the empty corridors. Walk into one of these abandoned wards now and you'll notice something strange. The silence doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy, like the air itself is holding on to stories you were never meant to hear. Paint peels off the walls. Rusted beds still sit in corners. Old wheelchairs remain tucked away as if waiting for a patient who will never return. And yet people who dare to explore these places report the same unsettling experiences. Sudden drops in temperature, voices calling their name, and figures moving in the dark. Could it be imagination? Maybe. But could it also be the echoes of history replaying themselves over and over again? Drop a emoji in the comments if you've ever visited an abandoned hospital, asylum, or even just an old building that gave you chills. Hospitals as portals between life and death. There is another idea that adds to this mystery. Hospitals are one of the few places in the world where the boundary between life and death is crossed every single day. People are born and people die, often in the very same building, sometimes even in the very same room. Think about that for a second. If you believe in energy, spirits, or the soul, then hospitals are like revolving doors between two realms. Some spirits may move on, while others linger, confused or unwilling to leave. It's no wonder so many ghost stories come from these places, from the whispers of patients who never made it home, to the shadows of doctors who refused to abandon their posts even in death. Hospitals have become synonymous with hauntings. What about you? Do you believe spirits could be trapped in places where life and death constantly overlap? Comment yes if you believe they can, or no if you think that's just superstition. Michigan's haunted legacy begins here, and this is where our story truly begins. Michigan, like many states, has a long medical history. Some of its earliest hospitals were built in the mid-1800s, when medical science was still developing. Soldiers from wars, immigrants with new diseases, and towns plagued with epidemics all poured into these institutions. Many of those hospitals couldn't handle the pressure. Patients died by the hundreds. Entire wings became morgues, and as the years went by, some of those places fell silent, left behind, decaying, but never truly empty. Michigan's haunted hospitals are not just buildings. They are monuments to human suffering, places where history itself refuses to fade. And as we move deeper into this documentary, we'll uncover not just the ghost stories, but also the psychological and scientific reasons that explain why hospitals feel so different, especially when the sun goes down. But before we continue, let me ask you one last thing for this section. If you had to choose, would you rather spend the night in a haunted house or in an abandoned hospital? Comment house or hospital below. I'll be checking to see which one wins. Because in Michigan, some of these hospitals make even the darkest haunted houses look tame. And stay with me until the very end, because the #1 haunted hospital in Michigan will send chills down your spine. Michigan may be famous for its lakes, forests, and old industrial towns, but hidden in its landscape is another kind of legacy, one soaked in suffering, sickness, and whispers of the dead. Hospitals here have been more than just places of healing. For over a century, they've been theaters of life and death, where tragedy unfolded in ways so intense that locals still believe the echoes never left. Think about it. Epidemics of tuberculosis, psychiatric asylums that experimented with questionable treatments, hospitals that couldn't keep up with the rapid spread of disease. For thousands of patients, Michigan hospitals were the final stop, and when the doors finally closed, many of these institutions were simply left to rot. But decay doesn't erase memories, it traps them. And that's why these hospitals have become hotspots for paranormal activity, drawing ghost hunters, urban explorers, and thrill seekers who want to know if the legends are real. Now here's where it gets exciting. Tonight, we were not just talking about hospitals in general. We were counting down the 15 most haunted hospitals in Michigan. These aren't just abandoned buildings. They're locations that locals refuse to step foot in, even in daylight. Some say you can hear the cries of patients from decades past. Others swear they've seen shadows moving across windows that should have been empty for years. Before we start, I want you to guess. Which number on this list do you think will be the scariest? Drop a number between 1 and 15 in the comments right now. And no skipping ahead. Let's see who guesses it right. Why hospitals in Michigan? Became so haunted. Michigan had one of the highest numbers of tuberculosis sanatoriums in the Midwest. These were places built specifically to quarantine patients with TB, which had no cure for decades. Whole families were torn apart as patients were sent away to die in isolated hospital wings. Many of those buildings still stand today, abandoned, their walls stained with history. Then there were the psychiatric hospitals. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, mental health care was poorly understood. Patients were subjected to experiments, harsh treatments, and in some cases, outright neglect. Overcrowding, mistreatment, and mysterious deaths weren't unusual. It's no wonder many believe their spirits still wander the halls. And we can't forget Michigan's industrial boom. With factories came accidents. With accidents came hospitals overflowing with injured workers. Many didn't survive. These tragedies piled onto the state's medical history, leaving scars that are more than just physical. If you were given the chance to explore an abandoned Michigan hospital overnight, would you do it? Yes or no? Comment below. I want to see how many of you are actually that brave. The countdown begins. Here's how this is going to work. We'll start at number 15 and work our way down to number 1. And trust me, every hospital on this list has a story that will make your skin crawl. But by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why many say it's the most terrifying hospital in the entire Midwest. And no, I'm not exaggerating. Some of the places on this list are so haunted that even paranormal investigators refuse to return after what they experienced. So grab your headphones, turn off the lights if you dare, and settle in, because once we start this countdown, you won't be able to look away. Quick challenge. If you're watching this at night, type night crew in the comments. If it's daytime, type safe hours. Let's see how many of you are brave enough to join the night crew. Are you ready? Because this is where the journey begins. Coming in at number 15, Eloise Psychiatric Hospital, Westland, Michigan. If you've lived in Michigan long enough, chances are you've heard the name Eloise. Once a sprawling complex just outside Detroit, Eloise Psychiatric Hospital was more like a city than a hospital. At its peak, it stretched across 900 acres, with 78 buildings, housing thousands of patients. But what made Eloise infamous wasn't its size. It was what happened inside. Eloise began in the 1830s as a poorhouse and evolved into an asylum. By the late 1800s, it became one of the largest psychiatric facilities in the United States. Patients came here for everything from minor depression to severe mental illness. But with overcrowding came abuse, neglect, and endless suffering. Doctors experimented with treatments we would find horrifying today. Insulin shock therapy, hydrotherapy, even lobotomies. Many patients entered Eloise and never left. Locals still whisper that thousands of unmarked graves lie beneath the soil, where patients were buried without names, forgotten by the world. Their spirits, some believe, are anything but at rest. Ghost stories from Eloise visitors who dare to explore the crumbling remains of Eloise report terrifying encounters. Shadow figures dart across empty hallways. Disembodied voices call out names in the dark. Some say they've heard the faint sobbing of women echoing through the ruins, even when no one is there. One urban explorer claimed he felt an icy hand grab his shoulder in a locked ward, only to find the room completely empty. Paranormal investigators have recorded unexplained screams, whispers, and sudden drops in temperature that made the entire group shiver. The hospital's tunnels are said to be the most haunted of all. Once used to transport patients and supplies, they now sit in eerie silence. Explorers say you can hear footsteps following you in the dark, growing louder, until you turn around and find nothing. If you were offered $10,000 to spend one night in the tunnels of Eloise, would you take it? Comment yes or no below. I'm curious to see how many risk takers are watching. Why Eloise still haunts Michigan. Eloise isn't just a hospital. It is a reminder of how society once treated its most vulnerable. Thousands suffered there. Many in ways we'll never fully know. The energy of pain and neglect has seeped into the walls, the ground, the very air around the ruins. Some believe this is why spirits linger, unwilling to move on. Today, parts of Eloise have been demolished, while others remain standing as a stark reminder of its dark history. And while some developers have tried to breathe new life into the land, locals say the spirits don't want to be disturbed. Even now, security guards and staff working in renovated sections claim they've seen apparitions roaming the grounds. Lights flicker without explanation. Doors slam shut when no one is near. The haunting of Eloise is very much alive, and it's only number 15 on our list. Tell me in the comments, would you ever visit Eloise in person? Or is this one you'd rather admire from a distance? Because if this is how terrifying number 15 is, just wait until you hear what we've got coming next. Number 14, Northville Psychiatric Hospital, Northville, Michigan. On the surface, Northville Psychiatric Hospital was meant to represent progress. Built in 1952, it was one of Michigan's most advanced mental health facilities of its time. Unlike older asylums, Northville promised more humane treatments, spacious grounds, and a brighter future for psychiatric care. For a while, it lived up to that promise. Patients enjoyed open areas, recreational programs, and a sense of freedom rarely seen in psychiatric hospitals of the past. But as the years went on, Northville suffered the same fate as so many other institutions. Funding cuts, overcrowding, and neglect turned the once modern facility into a place of despair. By the 1970s and 80s, reports of abuse, mistreatment, and patient suffering began to leak out. In 2003, the hospital was officially shut down, leaving its massive buildings to decay in silence. The haunting of Northville. Once the hospital was abandoned, stories began to spread. Urban explorers who ventured into the vast, graffiti-covered halls claimed they felt like they were being watched. Paranormal investigators recorded unexplained voices in the darkness, whispers, screams, even faint laughter that seemed to come from nowhere. One group reported hearing a child's voice calling for help in one of the old therapy rooms, only to find it completely empty. Another explorer swore he saw a woman in a hospital gown standing at the end of a hallway, staring at him. But when he blinked, she was gone. The underground service tunnels are said to be the most active. These tunnels once connected different wings of the hospital, carrying patients, supplies, and sometimes even bodies. People who walk them today report footsteps echoing behind them, even though they're alone. Others say they've seen shadows moving against the walls, growing closer, then vanishing into the dark. Would you dare walk through Northville's tunnels alone, with just a flashlight, yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. Why Northville's spirits remain? Some locals believe the spirits of patients still wander because they were never given peace in life. With the abrupt closure of the hospital, many patients were released suddenly, some with nowhere to go, others unable to understand what was happening. The confusion and trauma of that moment, some say, may have left an imprint on the grounds. Even after years of abandonment, strange activity continues. Police officers responding to trespassers have reported hearing footsteps and voices inside, only to find the building empty. One officer claimed he saw lights flicker in a wing that had no power. Today, Northville Psychiatric Hospital stands as a crumbling monument to forgotten promises and broken dreams. Its ruins are slowly being overtaken by nature, but the stories refuse to fade. For paranormal enthusiasts, it's one of the most haunted spots in Michigan, and it's only number 14 on our list. Quick question. If you could bring one piece of ghost hunting equipment to Northville, what would it be? An EMF meter, a spirit box, or just your phone camera? Comment below. Because as chilling as Northville is, the next hospital on our list has an even darker history, one that involves patients who were silenced forever. Coming in at number 13, Traverse City State Hospital, Traverse City, Michigan. If there's one place in Michigan that embodies both beauty and terror, it's Traverse City State Hospital. Originally known as the Northern Michigan Asylum, this sprawling institution opened its doors in 1885. Built in the Grand Kirkbride style, the hospital was designed to bring peace and calm to patients with mental illness. The tall spires, red brick walls, and picturesque grounds made it look more like a castle than an asylum. But as beautiful as it appeared from the outside, the reality inside was far more grim. Thousands of patients passed through its halls over the decades. Some found peace, but many found only pain. Treatments included electroshock therapy, isolation, and in some cases, experimental procedures that left patients traumatized for life. And of course, not everyone made it out. The hospital cemetery holds over 1,900 unmarked graves, patients who died here and were buried with no family to claim them. The spirits of Traverse City. The abandoned wings of Traverse City State Hospital are notorious among paranormal investigators. Visitors have reported hearing screams echoing through empty corridors, as though the pain of past patients is replaying itself again and again. Shadowy figures have been spotted moving in the old wards, especially near the attic and basement areas. One of the most chilling legends is of the so-called screaming patient. Explorers say if you stand quietly in certain hallways, you can hear the faint, distant sound of a woman crying, sometimes growing into a blood-curdling scream that seems to come from nowhere. Many believe this is the spirit of a patient who suffered greatly under experimental treatments and never found peace. Then there are the tunnels. Like many old hospitals, Traverse City had underground passageways that connected different buildings. Staff once used them to move patients discreetly. Today, they're pitch black, damp, and terrifying. People who venture inside report voices whispering directly into their ears, cold hands brushing against their arms, and footsteps following them when no one is there. Would you walk through those tunnels at midnight with nothing but a flashlight? Yes or no? Type your answer in the comments. And don't lie, I'll know. Why the haunting persists. What makes Traverse City especially eerie is the contrast between its outward beauty and its dark legacy. The grounds are peaceful, almost serene, yet the air feels heavy, as though the stories of the past are still alive. Paranormal groups that have investigated here consistently report high EMF spikes, sudden temperature drops, and disembodied voices caught on recorders. Even tourists who come to see the renovated parts of the hospital, now known as the Village at Grand Traverse Commons, say they've felt uneasy in certain areas. Some even refuse to go into the basements, claiming they felt like someone was watching them the entire time. The fact that so many people suffered here, often in silence and without recognition, may explain why the energy refuses to fade. Traverse City State Hospital is not just haunted by spirits, it is haunted by history itself. Be honest, if you visited Traverse City State Hospital, would you explore the haunted wings, or would you stick to the safe renovated areas? Drop your choice below, haunted or safe. And remember, this is just number 13. The hospitals are only going to get darker, creepier, and harder to forget from here on out. Number 12. Kalamazoo State Hospital, Kalamazoo, Michigan. In the heart of Michigan, there once stood a place that locals still whisper about, Kalamazoo State Hospital, also known as the Kalamazoo Regional Psychiatric Hospital. Opened in 1859, it was one of the earliest psychiatric facilities in the state. Like Traverse City, it was designed in the Kirkbride style, with long, stretching wings meant to give patients light and air. From the outside, it looked almost majestic, but behind its walls, the story was far more unsettling. For more than a century, the hospital treated thousands of patients, but treatment in those days often meant things we'd now consider barbaric. Ice water baths, electroshock therapy, restraints, and isolation were common. As the decades went by, stories of mistreatment, overcrowding, and patient abuse began to surface. Many patients never made it home. Some died from their conditions. Others, locals say, simply vanished into the system. Whispers in the wards. Even after parts of the hospital closed, strange stories lingered. Staff members who worked the night shifts often reported eerie occurrences. Doors that had been locked tight would suddenly swing open. Disembodied footsteps echoed down hallways when no one was there. Some nurses swore they heard patients crying, even though the wards were empty. One particularly chilling legend tells of a patient who died during an experimental treatment and was buried in the hospital's own graveyard. Visitors claim that on quiet nights, you can hear her moans drifting across the grounds, as though she's still searching for help. Then, there are the reports of shadows. Paranormal investigators who explored the abandoned sections captured figures darting across hallways on camera. Tall, dark outlines that seemed to move just out of sight. In one case, an investigator claimed something tugged on his coat so violently, he thought someone was physically behind him. But when he turned, the hallway was empty. If you heard footsteps behind you in an abandoned hospital hallway, would you keep walking, or would you run? Comment below, walk or run. The Forgotten Graveyard. Perhaps the most haunting part of Kalamazoo State Hospital is not the buildings themselves, but the cemetery. Hidden away, the hospital's burial grounds are filled with unmarked graves. These were patients who died with no families to claim them. People who were forgotten by history. Locals say the cemetery is active with spiritual energy. Ghost hunters report their equipment going haywire here. EMF spikes, temperature drops, and even strange voices captured on audio. Some claim to have felt overwhelming sadness while standing among the graves, as if the souls buried there are still crying out to be remembered. The legacy of Kalamazoo. Today, parts of the hospital still stand, though many buildings have been demolished or repurposed. Yet its legacy remains one of Michigan's darkest. The stories of suffering, the countless lives lost, and the unexplained phenomena that continue to this day make Kalamazoo one of the state's most haunted hospitals. Would you spend an hour in Kalamazoo's old cemetery at night with nothing but a lantern? Yes or no? Drop your answer below. And here is the thing. If Kalamazoo is already this unsettling at number 12, just imagine what horrors are waiting as we move deeper down this list. Coming in at number 11. Pontiac State Hospital, Pontiac, Michigan. If you drive through Pontiac today, you'll find only whispers of what once stood there. But for decades, Pontiac State Hospital was one of the most feared institutions in Michigan. Opened in the late 19th century, it was originally called the Eastern Michigan Asylum. Like many psychiatric facilities of its time, Pontiac was built big, bold, and imposing, almost like a fortress. Its towering brick walls and long wings were meant to house hundreds of patients. But with overcrowding came neglect, and with neglect came stories that still haunt the community today. Pontiac was notorious for the sheer number of patients it admitted. By the early 1900s, thousands were crowded into its halls, with little privacy or comfort. Conditions deteriorated quickly. Treatments included ice baths, electroshock therapy, and heavy restraints. Nurses and doctors worked tirelessly, but many patients were left unattended for long stretches of time. Some died quietly in their beds. Others, locals say, died screaming. Hauntings within the walls. Even before the hospital was torn down, reports of hauntings were common. Staff members swore they saw figures in patient gowns walking the halls long after visiting hours were over. Others claimed they felt cold hands brushing against their arms while checking empty rooms. One particularly famous story tells of a nurse working the night shift who heard a woman crying down the hallway. She followed the sound, only to find the ward completely empty. Just as she turned to leave, the crying grew louder, right behind her ear. She ran, refusing to ever work the night shift again. Visitors to the ruins before demolition often reported strange activity too. Disembodied voices echoed in the stairwells. Shadowy figures appeared in doorways. Paranormal investigators captured recordings of moans and even screams on tape. And almost everyone who entered claimed they felt an overwhelming sense of dread, like the building itself was alive and watching them. What would you do if you heard someone crying right behind you in an abandoned hospital? Comment below. Stay or run. The forgotten patients. Perhaps the most tragic part of Pontiac State Hospital's story is the patients who never left. Many who died there were buried in unmarked graves, their names lost to time. Locals believe these restless souls are the ones who still wander, unable to move on because they were forgotten in life and in death. Even after the hospital was demolished, strange reports continued from the grounds. People who pass by at night claim to see glowing lights in the field where the main building once stood. Some hear faint screams carried on the wind. Others say they've seen ghostly figures wandering through the grass, as if searching for the hospital that no longer exists. Pontiac's legacy. Though the building is gone, Pontiac State Hospital's legacy remains etched in Michigan's haunted history. The sheer scale of suffering that occurred there left a permanent mark, and locals still avoid the grounds after dark. Paranormal researchers often claim that when a building is demolished, spirits tied to it don't disappear. They linger, confused and restless, bound to the land itself. Do you think tearing down a haunted hospital makes the spirits leave? Or do they stay tied to the land forever? Comment, leave, or stay below. I'll be looking for your answers. And here's the frightening part. Pontiac was bad enough to earn the number 11 spot, but we have not even broken into the top 10 yet. From here on out, the stories only get more disturbing. Coming in at number 10, Harper Hospital, Detroit, Michigan. In the bustling heart of Detroit sits a hospital that looks ordinary to most people. But behind its modern walls lies a chilling past that refuses to stay buried. This is Harper Hospital, and its ghostly reputation stretches all the way back to the Civil War. When it opened in 1863, Harper was immediately pressed into service for the Union Army. Wounded soldiers were shipped here from bloody battlefields, and the hospital quickly became a place of both healing and heartbreak. More than 2,000 men took their final breaths within its wards, many far from home, their families never given a chance to say goodbye. The soldiers who never left. To this day, visitors and staff report seeing shadowy figures in the hallways, men in outdated military uniforms who vanish the second you look twice. Some nurses swear they've heard boots echoing in the corridors at night, heavy footsteps that stop abruptly when no one is there. There are stories of patients waking up to find a soldier standing silently by their bed, staring down at them. By the time they scream for help, the figure fades into nothing. Paranormal investigators who've brought recording equipment inside claim to have captured voices calling out words like help and home. If you woke up in a hospital room and saw a ghostly soldier staring at you, would you shut your eyes and pretend you didn't see him, or scream for help? Comment below, eyes closed, or scream. The surgical theater. One of the most haunted spots at Harper is the old surgical wing. During the Civil War, surgeries were often done in crude, painful conditions, with little anesthesia and almost no antiseptics. Many soldiers died on the operating tables. Staff who work late nights today say they sometimes hear the unmistakable sounds of surgery, clinking metal, hurried footsteps, and muffled groans of pain, even though the rooms are empty. Harper's restless legacy. Even though Harper Hospital has grown and modernized into one of Detroit's leading medical centers, its haunted reputation continues. Doctors and nurses may not always admit it publicly, but off the record, many share the same uneasy stories. Phantom footsteps, sudden cold spots, and the feeling of being watched when they're completely alone. Visitors often describe a heavy sadness in the air, especially at night. As one paranormal researcher put it, you don't just feel history at Harper, you feel the weight of all the souls who never left. Do you think hospitals that are still active can be just as haunted as abandoned ones? Drop your thoughts below. I'll be pinning some of the best answers. Why Harper still haunts. Harper ESE ghosts are not just the echoes of patients. They are soldiers whose lives were cut short in a time of unimaginable violence. Their unfinished stories, their pain, and their longing for home may be why they're still seen walking the halls. And here's the chilling part. Harper is still open today. That means if you ever find yourself in Detroit, you could walk the same halls where phantom soldiers are said to march. And you might just see one yourself. If Harper feels unsettling enough to crack the top 10, wait until you see what's next, because number 9 takes us into even darker territory. Number 9, Ionia State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, Ionia, Michigan. If Eloise was a city of the forgotten, then Ionia State Hospital was something darker, a fortress of the damned. Built in the 1880s, this massive asylum was reserved for some of the most dangerous and disturbed patients in Michigan. It stood on a hill, looming over the small town of Ionia like a shadow. Its high fences and guarded gates a reminder that not everyone inside was meant to be saved. Patients at Ionia were not only mentally ill, but often convicted criminals, transferred from prisons because they were deemed insane. The hospital became infamous for its harsh conditions. Restraints, isolation cells, and experimental treatments were common. Whispers of abuse and neglect spread, and many patients died behind its walls, some violently. The darkest corridors. Even after its closure in the late 20th century, Ionia's reputation as one of the most haunted places in Michigan only grew. Former staff and paranormal investigators claim the building is alive with activity. Shadow figures have been spotted pacing the abandoned corridors, doors slam shut without warning, and visitors often report the overwhelming feeling of being followed. One particularly chilling legend is of the Laughing Man. Paranormal groups exploring the hospital have reported hearing bursts of laughter echoing down the hallways. Harsh, manic laughter that seems to come from nowhere. Some investigators believe it as the spirit of a patient who died in isolation, after years of mental deterioration. If you heard laughter in an abandoned asylum, would you chase it to see who or what was there? Comment below, follow or flee. The isolation cells. The isolation rooms at Ionia are said to be especially active. Visitors describe sudden drops in temperature, loud bangs against the walls, and even the sensation of hands grabbing at them in the dark. One investigator who spent the night in a cell reported that something whispered his name over and over until he had to be pulled out, visibly shaken. Others claimed to see full apparitions, figures in tattered clothing, faces twisted in anguish, appearing at the ends of hallways before vanishing into the walls. The residual energy. Unlike many hospitals where spirits seem lost or confused, the energy at Ionia feels darker. Paranormal researchers believe this is because of the extreme emotions tied to the place: rage, violence, fear, and despair. It's said that the very walls absorbed the trauma, creating a kind of psychic imprint that replays itself endlessly. Do you think violent deaths leave behind stronger hauntings than peaceful ones? Comment yes or no. I want to see what you think. Why Ionia still terrifies. Though much of the hospital has been demolished, the land it stood on is still whispered about in the town. Locals avoid going near it after dark, saying the screams and laughter still echo in the night air. For paranormal enthusiasts, Ionia is one of the most terrifying entries in Michigan's haunted history. If the ghosts of soldiers haunt Harper at Nur 10, the tortured souls of criminals and patients make Ionia at Nur 9 even more disturbing. And yet, the countdown only gets more horrifying from here. Coming in at number 8, Hurley Medical Center, Flint, Michigan. At first glance, Hurley Medical Center in Flint looks like any other busy hospital. It is modern, it is active, and every day it saves countless lives. But behind the bright lights and the steady hum of machines, there are stories that chill even the bravest nurses to the bone. Hurley opened its doors in 1908, and with over a century of medical history, it has seen tragedy, trauma, and death on a massive scale. That kind of history leaves a mark, and many believe that S.Y. Hurley has become one of the most haunted hospitals still operating in Michigan today. The Children's Ward. Ask almost anyone who has worked at Hurley, and they will tell you the same thing. The Children's Ward is the heart of the hauntings. Nurses whisper about toys that move on their own, doors that open and close without explanation, and, most unsettling of all, the sound of children laughing or crying in the middle of the night, even when the ward is empty. One nurse shared a story about walking past a patient room and seeing tiny handprints pressed against the glass from the inside. But the room was unoccupied. When she looked closer, the handprints slowly faded, as if wiped away by invisible fingers. Would you dare spend a night alone in a haunted children's ward, listening to ghostly laughter? Comment below, yes or never. The Phantom Nurse Hurley also has its own Lady in White legend. Staff members claim to see a nurse dressed in outdated white clothing from the 1950s. She appears in hallways, quietly checking on patients before vanishing without a sound. Some patients who have seen her say she even adjusts their blankets or touches their arm gently, as if comforting them. But here is the eerie twist. No one alive matches her description, and when patients describe her face, staff recognize it from an old photo of a nurse who died decades ago. The elevators that move themselves. Another chilling part of Hurley's hauntings comes from the elevators. Staff claim the elevators sometimes stop on random floors, open their doors, and wait, even though no one is inside. Paranormal investigators who visited the hospital suggested that the elevators might be responding to phantom passengers, spirits still trying to move between wards. If a hospital elevator door opened in front of you and no one was there, would you step inside or take the stairs? Comment below, elevator or stairs. Why Hurley haunts us still unlike many of the other hospitals on this list. Hurley is still in full operation. That means its hauntings are ongoing, witnessed by staff, patients, and visitors every single year. There is something uniquely terrifying about a haunted hospital that's still alive with activity, because the line between the living and the dead feels even thinner. From ghostly nurses to restless children, Hurley Medical Center has earned its place as one of the most haunted hospitals in Michigan. And the scariest part? You could check in as a patient today and find yourself face to face with a ghost. If Hurley is this unsettling at number 8, brace yourself, because number 7 takes us even deeper into Michigan's most terrifying wards. Number 7, Michigan State Sanatorium, Howell, Michigan. Tucked away in Howell once stood a place built to fight disease, but it became a house of suffering and, according to many, a prison of restless spirits. This was the Michigan State Sanatorium, opened in 1907 to treat patients with tuberculosis, a disease that was almost always a slow, painful death sentence in the early 20th century. The sanatorium was massive, with long white corridors, sunrooms, and isolation wards. Doctors believed fresh air and sunlight were the best treatments, so patients were often left on open-air porches, even in the freezing Michigan winters. Thousands died here, many of them young, their lives cut short by an illness that had no cure. Echoes of the dying visitors and paranormal investigators claim the sanatorium is still alive with energy from those who perished there. People walking the grounds report hearing coughing in the wind, the ragged, painful coughs of the sick, even though the building has been closed for decades. In the old wards, shadows are said to move across the walls. Some explorers describe hearing voices whispering their names, while others have felt icy fingers brush against their arms. One group reported seeing a woman in a hospital gown standing at the end of a hallway. She didn't move. She just stared at them until they turned to run. When they looked back, the hallway was empty. If you saw a ghost standing silently at the end of a hallway, would you approach it or turn and run? Comment below, approach or run. The morgue and crematorium. Perhaps the most terrifying parts of the sanatorium were its morgue and crematorium. With so many deaths, the hospital had to handle bodies quickly. Paranormal groups who have entered these areas describe overwhelming feelings of dread. Temperatures drop suddenly. EVP recorders pick up voices saying things like, "Get out," or "Help me." Some investigators claim they've been pushed, scratched, or even choked while exploring. There's also a legend of the man in the basement. Explorers say a tall, shadowy figure with glowing eyes lurks near the crematorium. He doesn't just appear in shadows. People say he charges at you, forcing even the bravest ghost hunters to flee. The restless patients locals believe the spirits here remain because of how much suffering occurred on the grounds. Many patients were cut off from their families, isolated in their final moments, and buried nearby in unmarked graves. The weight of loneliness, despair, and pain seems to linger, replaying itself night after night. Would you be brave enough to step into the old morgue of a haunted sanatorium at night? Comment below, yes or no. Why the sanatorium still haunts Michigan. Though the original buildings have been torn down, people still swear the land itself is haunted. Strange lights flicker in the fields where the wards once stood. Phantom coughs and cries are heard by those who live nearby. Some even claim to see ghostly figures walking the grounds, as if they are still searching for the sunlight treatments that never saved them. The Michigan State Sanatorium may be gone physically, but its reputation remains, a reminder that some tragedies don't fade with time. If the sanatorium is terrifying enough to take number 7, wait until you see what is waiting in the top 6. From here, the stories only grow darker. Number 6, St. Joseph's Hospital, Detroit, Michigan. Deep in the heart of Detroit once stood St. Joseph's Hospital, one of Michigan's earliest Catholic hospitals, built in the mid-1800s. On the surface, it was a place of healing, run by devoted nuns and doctors. But as decades passed, the building collected layer after layer of tragedy. And today, it's remembered less for medicine and more for the chilling hauntings that linger within its walls. The Nun Who Never Left, one of the most famous ghost stories from St. Joseph's, involves a nun who cared for patients tirelessly during a deadly influenza outbreak. She worked until she herself became sick and died inside the hospital. Staff and visitors still report seeing her wandering the darkened hallways, rosary in hand, whispering prayers for the sick. But here is where it gets terrifying. Some patients claim to wake up in the middle of the night to see her standing over their bed, praying. And in several cases, the patients died just hours later. People began to call her the Death Nun, a spectral figure that seemed to appear only when someone's time was near. If you saw a ghostly nun standing by your hospital bed at night, would you feel comforted or terrified? Comment below, comforted or terrified. The crying walls. Visitors to the old hospital claimed to hear the sound of weeping echoing through empty rooms. Some swore the cries came from the walls themselves, as if the building absorbed the pain of countless deaths. Maintenance workers who had to check on the old boiler rooms refused to go in alone, saying they could hear moans and whispers following them in the dark. One urban explorer even reported that while filming, his camera picked up a faint voice whispering, "Stay with me." He didn't hear it at the time, only when he reviewed the footage later. Children's ward hauntings. Like many hospitals, St. Joseph's had a ward for children, and according to stories, it remains the most active spot. People describe toys moving by themselves, ghostly giggles echoing in the dark, and wheelchairs rolling across the floor with no one in them. The most disturbing reports, though, are of a small boy in a hospital gown who appears in the hallway and asks visitors, "Have you seen my mom?" When they blink, he disappears. Would you have the courage to answer a ghost child if he asked you a question? Yes or no? Drop it in the comments. Why St. Joseph's still terrifies Detroit. Though much of the original hospital has been closed, the legends never died. Paranormal investigators who visited say St. Joseph's carries an oppressive energy, heavy, suffocating, and sorrowful. Even without the equipment, anyone who walks those hallways can feel the weight of centuries of suffering. This hospital was built on faith and compassion, but its ghost stories are some of the darkest in Michigan. A nun who signals death, walls that cry with sorrow, and children who never found peace. St. Joseph's earns its chilling spot at number 6. And if you think this is terrifying, wait until you see number 5. From here on, the stories only get darker, more violent, and impossible to forget. Number 5. Marquette Branch Prison Hospital, Marquette, Michigan. Now this one is different. Unlike the other hospitals on our list, the Marquette Branch Prison Hospital wasn't built for the public. It was built for prisoners. And that makes it one of the darkest, most terrifying places in Michigan. The prison itself opened in the late 1800s, and with it came a hospital wing to treat inmates. But remember, this was not a place of mercy. Many of the men who entered never left alive. Executions, beatings, suicides, and violent deaths filled the air with suffering. And some say those restless souls are still locked inside. The screams in the night guards and staff who worked the night shifts swore that the hospital wing was the worst place in the entire prison. They reported screams echoing through empty cells, doors slamming shut when no one was there, and the unmistakable sound of shackles dragging across the floor. One former officer confessed that he hated walking the hospital corridors because every time he did, he felt invisible eyes watching him. He said the temperature would plummet, and sometimes he could hear faint whispers saying his name. Imagine being a prison guard, alone in a haunted hospital wing at 3 a.m. Would you finish the shift or walk out? Comment below, stay or leave. The Ghost of Cell Block. One of the hospital's most famous legends is tied to Cell Block 9. Inmates claimed a man who was beaten to death by guards never left. His ghost appears as a shadow figure pacing up and down the halls. Some say he rattles the bars violently, while others believe he follows anyone who dares enter, breathing down their neck. Urban explorers who have managed to sneak inside describe sudden pressure on their chests, making it hard to breathe, as if the ghost himself is holding them down. The operating room. The hospital also had an operating room where prisoners underwent surgery, often without proper anesthesia. Many of those procedures ended in death. Today, people say the room is still filled with screams. Investigators have recorded chilling EVPs, voices crying out, "Stop," or "It hurts." One group even reported seeing a man in a hospital gown standing in the corner, staring. When they turned their flashlight toward him, he was gone. Would you dare step into an abandoned prison operating room at night? Drop a if your answer is yes. Why? It is one of Michigan's darkest haunts. The Marquette Branch Prison Hospital is more than haunted. It's cursed by violence, pain, and injustice. Every brick seems to hold a memory of suffering, and unlike other hospitals built to heal, this one was built to punish. That's why many believe the spirits here are not just lost. They are angry, and they are not afraid to make their presence known to anyone who dares enter. If the prison hospital makes your skin crawl at number 5, just wait. The next 4 hospitals will leave you questioning if you ever walk through a Michigan ward after dark. Number 4, Harper Hospital, Detroit, Michigan. If Detroit has a heart of medical history, it's Harper Hospital. Built in 1863 during the Civil War, it was one of the first hospitals in Michigan to treat wounded soldiers. That means from day one, its halls were filled with blood, pain, and death. Over the decades, Harper became one of the busiest hospitals in the state, and many believe the sheer amount of suffering within its walls left behind more than just memories. Civil War spirits. Harper opened its doors at the height of the Civil War. Soldiers with missing limbs, torn flesh, and mortal wounds were brought here by the dozens. Surgeons worked around the clock, often amputating without proper anesthetics. The screams of those men echoed through the wards, and some say they still do. Visitors have reported seeing men in Civil War uniforms wandering the hospital's older wings. Patients have described hearing boots stomping down the hallway at night, only for no one to be there. Paranormal investigators captured EVPs of groaning voices saying, "Doctor," and "Help me," in what used to be surgical wards. If you suddenly saw a wounded Civil War soldier standing in a hospital hallway, would you run to help or run the other way? Comment, help or run. The elevator ghost. One of Harper's most chilling modern legends involves its elevators. Staff and patients alike have reported riding alone, only to feel the elevator stop at a random floor. The doors open, and standing there is a man in outdated hospital garb, pale, bloody, and staring. He never steps inside. He just looks at you and vanishes when the doors close. Some workers refuse to ride the elevators alone because of these stories, preferring the stairs no matter how many floors they need to climb. Be honest. If an elevator door opened to reveal a ghostly figure staring at you, would you step out or stay put? Comment below. Step out or stay put. The shadow in the surgery wing. Doctors and nurses working late have told stories of a tall, shadowy figure that lingers in the old surgical wing. It's described as darker than the dark itself, with no features, just a void that moves. One nurse claimed she was charting notes when she saw the shadow figure glide across the room and stop behind her. She froze, too afraid to turn around. After a full minute, it slipped through the wall and was gone. Investigators believe this entity might not be a single ghost, but the collective energy of trauma from thousands of surgeries and deaths performed there. Why Harper still haunts Detroit. Unlike many abandoned hospitals, Harper is still standing and active, which makes its hauntings even more unnerving. Staff don't just tell ghost stories for fun, they live them. Patients check in for healing, only to report terrifying encounters they can't explain. From Civil War soldiers to shadowy figures, Harper Hospital has more than earned its place as one of Michigan's most haunted medical sites. And at number 4, we're only scratching the surface. Because the top 3, they are on another level. Stories so chilling that even seasoned ghost hunters hesitate before stepping inside. Number 3, Clinton Valley Center, Pontiac, Michigan. If there was ever a place in Michigan that embodied horror, it was Clinton Valley Center. Originally built in the 1870s as the Oakland County Asylum for the Insane, this massive psychiatric institution became notorious for overcrowding, mistreatment, and cruelty. Thousands of patients passed through its gates, many never left alive. By the time it closed in the 1990s, Clinton Valley had earned a reputation as one of the darkest hospitals in the Midwest. And those who've explored the abandoned ruins claim the spirits trapped inside are anything but quiet. The lurking shadows. Urban explorers and former staff tell chilling stories of the asylum's endless hallways. At night, shadows move against the walls, but not like ordinary shadows. These are tall, human-shaped, and they don't always obey the light. Some say they follow you, staying just out of reach until suddenly they vanish. One group of investigators swore they saw a dark figure sprint across the hallway and into a locked room. When they forced the door open, the room was empty. But the air was ice cold. If you saw a shadow figure run into a locked room, would you open the door to check or walk away? Comment below. Check or walk away. The screams of the forgotten Clinton Valley was infamous for its treatment methods. Electroshock therapy, lobotomies, and heavy restraints were common. People who go inside say they can still hear the echoes of that pain. Distant screams, cries for help, and even the rattling of metal restraints have been recorded. One explorer shared a story of hearing a woman's voice whisper directly into his ear. "They hurt me." He ran and never came back. The basement tunnels. Perhaps the most terrifying part of Clinton Valley was its underground tunnels. These were used to transport patients, bodies, and supplies. Today, the tunnels are pitch black and soaked in paranormal legends. Explorers report being shoved in the dark, scratched, and even feeling something grab their ankles. EVPs captured chilling voices, including one that clearly said, "Stay down here with us." Would you dare walk alone through an abandoned asylum tunnel with only a flashlight? Comment, yes or no. Why Clinton Valley is in the top 3. This hospital does not just feel haunted, it feels angry. The suffering that took place within its walls was immense, and many believe the spirits here are restless, bitter, and dangerous. Even the bravest ghost hunters admit Clinton Valley Center has an energy unlike anywhere else. It is no wonder this asylum sits at number 3 on our list. But as terrifying as it is, what waits at number 2 and number 1 is far, far worse. Number 2, Lapeer State Home and Training School, Lapeer, Michigan. Few places in Michigan carry a reputation as dark as the Lapeer State Home and Training School. Built in the late 1800s, it was originally designed as an institution for children and adults with developmental disabilities. But behind its official mission of care, the reality was far more sinister. For decades, thousands of residents lived and died within its walls. Stories of abuse, neglect, and mistreatment haunted the facility until its eventual closure in the 1990s. And today, many believe the spirits of those who suffered there have never left. The children's laughter, one of the most chilling accounts, comes from the old children's dormitories. Visitors have reported hearing laughter echoing through empty rooms, followed by the sound of running footsteps. Some explorers said they even saw small figures darting across the hallways, but when they chased after them, the rooms were completely empty. One investigator left a ball in the middle of a hallway. Minutes later, it rolled slowly forward, as if pushed by unseen hands. If you heard children laughing in an abandoned asylum, would you follow the sound or get out immediately? Comment below, follow or run. The Crying Woman. Another common sighting is a ghostly woman who roams the grounds, sobbing. Witnesses describe her as wearing a nurse's uniform, her face hidden by her hands. Some believe she was a caretaker overwhelmed by the suffering she saw every day. Others say she's a spirit trapped by guilt. One group of paranormal researchers swore they caught her voice on tape, whispering, "I'm sorry." The basement ward. Perhaps the most terrifying location in the Lapeer State Home is the basement ward, where the most difficult patients were kept. Shackles were reportedly still attached to the walls long after the institution closed. Explorers claim to feel sudden pressure on their chests in this area, as though unseen hands are trying to hold them down. EVPs captured voices crying, "Don't leave us and help." One investigator reported being scratched across the arm, the marks lasting for days. Would you dare step into a basement ward where people were once shackled to the walls? Comment, yes or never. Why Lapeer still horrifies Michigan. The Lapeer State Home wasn't just a hospital, it was a place of unimaginable suffering. Thousands of lives ended there, many forgotten in unmarked graves nearby. Locals say the energy of despair is so strong that even standing outside the grounds can make you feel sick. With ghost children, weeping spirits, and a history of cruelty, the Lapeer State Home has earned its place as one of Michigan's most haunted sites, and it takes the chilling spot at Breach Out 2. But if this made your skin crawl, prepare yourself, because number 1 is so infamous, so terrifying, that even seasoned investigators refuse to step inside after dark. Number 1, Detroit's Herman Kiefer Hospital, Detroit, Michigan. If there is one hospital in Michigan that rivals Eloise in infamy, it's Herman Kiefer Hospital. Built in 1911, it was originally designed to treat contagious diseases like smallpox, diphtheria, and tuberculosis. That alone set the stage for tragedy, because almost everyone who entered never came out alive. By the time it closed in 2013, Herman Kiefer had built up over a century of fear, sorrow, and whispered legends. Today, it's considered one of Detroit's most terrifying abandoned places, the isolation wards. Herman Kiefer was designed with massive isolation wings to keep the sick away from the healthy. Patients lived and died alone, sometimes locked away from human contact for months. Explorers say the silence of these abandoned wards is crushing, and then, without warning, it's broken by coughing. Paranormal teams have recorded disembodied voices calling, "Nurse," and "Help me," in the old TB wings. One visitor even claimed to see a pale man standing at the end of a hallway, only to watch him vanish into the wall. If you were locked in an abandoned hospital ward and heard coughing behind you, would you turn around? Comment below, yes or no. The morgue and autopsy rooms. Like all old hospitals, Herman Kiefer had a morgue, but this one was massive, designed to handle outbreaks that killed dozens at a time. People who enter the autopsy rooms today report the smell of rot, even though the hospital has been empty for years. EVPs captured chilling voices saying, "Don't leave me," and "Get out." Investigators claim cold spots move with them, as though something unseen is following their every step. One group of explorers swore they saw an operating table shift across the floor on its own, heavy steel sliding over cracked tile, with no explanation. The ghostly doctor. Several legends speak of a ghostly doctor who still roams the halls. He has been described as tall, wearing a long white coat and carrying a clipboard. Witnesses say he appears suddenly, walks calmly past, and disappears through a doorway. Paranormal investigators call him the Doctor of Death, believing he may have been a physician who worked through deadly epidemics, and perhaps never left his post. Would you follow a ghost doctor if he appeared in front of you, or would you run the other way? Comment, follow, or run. Why Herman Kiefer takes number 1. With over 100 years of death, disease, and sorrow inside its walls, Herman Kiefer is a place heavy with tragedy. Unlike Eloise, which became infamous for psychiatric treatment, Herman Kiefer's hauntings are rooted in disease, isolation, and mass death. That makes it uniquely terrifying, because the ghosts here don't just feel restless. They feel contagious, as if their suffering is something you could still catch just by stepping inside. And that's why Herman Kiefer Hospital deserves the crown as the #1 most haunted hospital in Michigan. Which hospital on this list gave you the worst chills? Type the number 15, 10, 5, or 1 in the comments, and let's see which spot creeps people out the most. And there you have it. The 15 most haunted hospitals in Michigan. From the ghostly screams inside Eloise, to the restless patients of Traverse City, and finally to the dark shadows of Detroit's Herman Kiefer Hospital. These wards carry stories that will never die. But now, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, which of these hospitals gave you the worst chills? Was it Eloise at the start, Traverse City's dark asylum halls, or Herman Kiefer at the very end? Type the number that scared you most. And here is another one. Are you watching this video at night or during the day? Drop a comment that says night crew if it's after dark where you are, or safe hours if it's daytime. Let's see which side is braver. I will be reading the comments and pinning the most interesting ones, so don't be shy. And because I love seeing this, tell me what country or state you're rewatching from, and what time it is right now. We have had people watching these haunted history videos from everywhere, the US, Canada, the UK, even viewers from places like the Philippines, Netherlands, and Brazil. Let's see how global our haunted family really is. If you made it all the way to the end, that makes you part of our haunted history community. You're officially one of the brave ones, so here is your challenge. Smash that like button so more people discover these ghost stories. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a midnight premiere. And share this video with a friend who says they are not scared of ghosts. Let's see if they can sit through this countdown without jumping. Remember, hospitals are places of life and death, healing and sorrow. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the walls of these abandoned wards are heavy with history. And sometimes, history doesn't stay quiet. This is Vanguard Vault signing off. Stay curious, stay brave, and never ever wander alone through a hospital after dark. Until next time, good night and good luck.